Good evening. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Consciousness Unchained. On Consciousness Unchained, we are here to talk about various topics, to discuss them in depth, but we will not stay committed to only one topic per episode. So be ready. What you see here is you see a microphone. And this particular microphone represents that we will introduce guests to our audience from time to time. Anybody who feels like they'd like to come on, they'd like to talk about any of the issues that we've covered in the past, or you have an issue that you really feel is very, very important right now, then we will talk about it and invite you on to the show. Again, this is called Consciousness Unchained. I am from the baby boom generation. And introduce yourself, please, for the audience.
I'm Shy, and I'm from the Zoomer generation.
Yes, and so I want to be clear. This format is called Consciousness Unchained, but we will try to bridge the gap between generations. And in these generations, we have various people with various degrees of knowledge. Culture changes over time, and what we want to do is we want to talk about culture. We want to talk about what's happened to us as a society, people in our society in general, but specifically, we really want to talk about Black Americans. I'm a Black American, African American. People can use whatever they feel is politically correct. I won't shy away from that. So let's chop it up. What's going on in the news right now that we can talk about, Shy? I got a few things, but if there's something that you want to get off your chest, then let's get it out in the open so our listeners can hear.
So I've honestly been taking a break from a lot of the conversation, kind of refining my skills on some issues that I find important. But I've definitely had to take kind of a cleanse with the issue of constantly being in other people's lives and constantly wanting to worry about what everybody else has going on. And I think it takes away from when you're constantly plugged in, constantly looking for a new statistic, a new fact, a new debate, a new what the president's doing. Like, I think that it makes you shy away from real life, that that we are Americans, that we are Black Americans, and life here has its beautiful moments, and there are lots of them. So there's not much. I'm gonna let you lead this one because I've
Okay.
been taking a chill on
All
that
right.
stuff.
Now, and I understand what that's like to actually take a step or two or three back. Sometimes, it seems like life can beat you down if you allow it to beat you down. One of the things that's really important to me is being able to talk to one another, being able to communicate in a fashion that shows who you are as a respectful human being, moving forward and moving past any pain or past any hurt or past anything that you feel was betrayal. I feel like one of the problems that we have as a society, that there are very few people who are willing to talk. And ever since we got these iPhones, more people want to communicate on these iPhones and don't want to have face-to-face conversation. One of the things that I'll never allow anybody to do for me is tell me what I can and cannot do. I'm a free man. And I'll always consider myself free. I don't care what anybody thinks about it. I don't care what anybody thinks about me. I'm going to speak my mind about what I feel is important. I'm always looking for those individuals who are willing to do the same. Here's the number one issue for me too. We, and when I say we, our society in general is sick. And I mean that sincerely. Our society is sick. Yes, we have a lot of good, many good people in our society, in our communities, but we have far too many people who are stuck in themselves that cannot move out of their own way to elevate their consciousness. And this is why we call it Consciousness Unchained. So I'm gonna reiterate that over and over again, that we need to elevate our consciousness. How much are we seeing that you think speaks to that, speaks to this idea that we have a hard time elevating our consciousness, and we've allowed others to dictate who they think we are. So now we live life like that's who we are.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I take the cleanses from social media, because if I'm constantly having someone else tell me what to think and how to feel, or finding different things to be upset with, it it's hard to grow in that. You can become the smartest person ever and not have genuine emotional skills. And I think that those two things, like having the disconnect, you can be smart without emotional, like it doesn't make ground for a happy conversations. It doesn't make you want to talk to people. It makes you jaded when you constantly are just in your phone or worrying about the next thing, or if you watch, politics. I think that can absolutely push you to be jaded against certain types of people. And I'm not saying that there isn't times where discontent should be had with people's views on things, but I think that we are free. And I think the more that we keep allowing people to tell us that we're not, it makes you actually start to feel that way.
Right.
And then you don't live your life in control. You don't actually use your free will in the most positive way. People love to throw that out there and say like, well, we have free will and all those other things. But how many people genuinely take action with that?
Right.
How many people connect the reality to, whether you want to call it spiritual, emotional, mental? How many people really live inside soul, mind, and body? I think there's a huge disconnect with it, and it shows by the way that we treat people.
Right.
By the relationships that we have, by the continuous allowing other people to disrespect you, bring you down, having multiple relationships with those types of people. I think it's just like, no matter what gender you are, I think it's definitely a chronic illness that we are experiencing, is the lack of community, the lack of love, the lack of just all the different
self-awareness.
Yeah, exactly.
Self-awareness. And when I see individuals who are in close proximity to one another, and they call themselves friends, or they may be in a relationship, and then they're like this, especially if you're having a meal together. And if you're sitting at a table and you're having a meal at a restaurant or even at home, and you're like this while you're having a meal, and then you're eating your food, and then you're still looking at your phone and doing these kinds of things, I really believe that's become a psychosis.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean this. It's a psychosis if you constantly have to be on your phone. What is that term? There was a movie that was out a long time ago. The movie by Peele, Key and Peele.
Get Out.
Get Out. Yes.
Fire movie.
Yes. Get Out.
Mm-hmm. That's scientific all the way down to just being a Black person and how they stripped like Black people of all types of, there's a word I'm looking for, like humanity, basically.
And their identity.
You degrade them. Yes, identity. Yes, that is a cultural thing that's been happening, but like now we're seeing it on mass levels.
Yes. And what's interesting too, when we think about identity, identity isn't like monolithic, right? We have the opportunity to establish our identities, and it's not something that you can grow into immediately. It's something that develops over time.
Mm-hmm.
Your identity. Once you establish an identity, what happens is people will either gravitate to that identity or they will repel from that identity. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I've learned in embracing my identity and who I believe that I am is that those who also understand me, they'll be there. Those who don't, maybe the message repels them because maybe sometimes it's truth. One of the things I try my best not to do is I never try to throw jabs at individuals and call them out in public. Mm-hmm. And if somebody can find a clip about me calling an individual out in public, I have done that, but it's rare. And when I did do it is because those individuals went public and they really tried to go in on me, but didn't want to entertain a conversation with me. I feel like what that reflects when you are willing to have the conversation one-on-one, person to person, it reflects your courageousness. Mm-hmm. It reflects the fact that, look, man, I'm a man. Mm-hmm. And so same thing with young ladies. One of the things that I've noticed with too many young ladies, I don't see this as much with young men, particularly when I'm talking about teenagers. Where's all this angst come from with young ladies who feel like they need to fight one another? Mm-hmm. Where does that come from? Mm-hmm. What is growing inside? What's beneath the surface? What's beneath the skin and in the soul and in the spirit of people who feel like if you're not fighting physically, you need to fight somebody based upon something that you're feeling inside that has nothing to do with you.
Yeah, it's chaos.
Yeah. Have you seen quite a bit of that?
Absolutely. I mean, the girls definitely going like to Sandusky and growing up, The girls definitely fought a lot more than the boys. I don't necessarily understand either because it's not things to fight over either. Like I feel like it's like basic, it's not even necessarily resources. It's not things that like are life or death or it's like a serious matter, your kids. It's everything but that.
Right.
It's the most unserious things ever and I don't actually know. It's not something I've thought too much about why that is a common occurrence.
And what never made sense to me is when I hear about young ladies fighting over a few things. One, that they're jealous about another young lady who conducts themselves in a certain way. And it doesn't mean that the young lady believes that she is better than anybody, but because she's either pretty or maybe she dresses nice. It could be a number of things. Where does that angst and that envy come from?
Home.
You know what I mean?
Mm.
And sometimes it could come from that, but where else? If it's not coming from home, let's say they come from a home where the parent doesn't teach that, doesn't reflect that, then where do children and teenagers pick that up? You know what I mean? So I'm wondering about that kind of angst. And I've said this before. When I think about when I see that kind of anger directed from one lady to another or from one young man to another, what can make you go there when you really think about it? You said something about this. It's not about resources. It's not about somebody stealing something from you or taking anything from your pockets. It's not about anybody disrespecting your sister or doing anything physically. It's about talk.
Hmm.
It's about talk. And so one of the things that I made a commitment to years ago when I first ran for school board, social media was big then. People would jump online and would say certain things. There was a time when there were a lot of stories that were in the newspaper that were based upon just certain moves that I had made. And then every now and then I'd see comments that were negative about something that I did, why I did what I did. I generally just got to the point where I said, I don't need to read any comments from anybody. I don't need to see your comments. If you want to talk to me, I'm easy to find. If you want to talk to me, I'm always willing to have a conversation. I don't know if I told you this or not, but there was a time when, there was an uproar in our community, and I had probably 4 or 5 individuals that had so much to say online, so much to say in social media, but not one time did any of those individuals accept my invitation to have a conversation. I'll have those individuals who want to come on this format, Consciousness Unchained. And you know what I'm going to do, Shot? I will break the mic out. I'll say, here you go. Let's come on. Come on. I'm waiting. Anybody who wants to have that conversation, do you know anybody who wants to have that conversation, Shot? And we can put the mic right up here in their face to have the conversation. Stop being cowards out here. This is one of the things that's a problem. And now I'm speaking I'm speaking to us. I'm speaking to us as men. You can speak to the young ladies, right? Even though there's this generational difference and gap, I'm speaking to men. What do we expect our boys, our teenagers to become when they don't see us fighting? When they don't see us standing up? And fighting doesn't mean that you throwing jabs. You can throw rhetorical jabs. You can throw your jabs with your words, with your consciousness. That represents strength. How often do our young men see that? How often do our young ladies see that? That's what I'm looking for. If you all want to change the condition of what's going on in our hometown right now, and I can only speak of our hometown because we're in Sandusky right now. If you want to make a change, then stand up. Stop running your mouth. Stop talking about what needs to happen and be about the change. Be about the change. I know I got a little excited, but I'm dead serious about this. I mean, how do you feel about that?
I agree. I think if we want to see things, and it all comes down to just a conversation. I think that's really where it starts, where it should go, and where it needs to be. Is even if you don't agree, we've definitely lost the art of like debate. If you don't agree with someone genuinely, and like people want to debate, but it's never factual. I do not like that. I think that it's all opinion based. You can debate an opinion all day. You cannot debate a fact. Like there's just a fact is a fact is a fact. And I think that when you do all that other running your mouth in areas that don't matter, yeah, you're going to get skewed from the facts. And these kids, they need to be being read to. They need to be informed. They need to know their left from their right as soon as anything. My mom, when Kane was a baby, before he could even talk, understand, my mom was saying his colors to him, telling him this is his left and his right. I very clearly remember that. And Kane's known as left and right. We would go on bike rides. How old are kids when they're about to start riding a bike? Well, like 4 or 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kane was at 4 and 5 riding a bike. Kane go left, Kane go right, and he already knew. And I think that right there, those immediate moments of childhood. So I'm speaking for like the parents out there who aren't educating their kids and aren't like, putting 100% of effort into making sure like you had a kid. What you got going on, that baby dad, that baby mom, that bullshit, the bull stuff, selling the bull stuff. What is there to it? And that's not like a judgmental sentence. Like I'm not saying like,
No, I know
but
what you
we're
mean.
capable of more as a community.
I know exactly what you're saying.
Everybody wants to get married and do all this other stuff and start families, but like if you know what an actual marriage is, and this is not coming from someone who's religious, but where marriage came from and what it is about, it's a covenant. It's a covenant of God before your community. So we make all these promises as humans, we start these families, and what do we actually do to support them? Whether you're a man or a woman, what do we as a community to support these upcoming kids to make sure they have enough fundraisers to do all the cool things and go on to the cool trips? I think Sandusky does do a good job as far as like a lot of the aspects of like the high school with the college credit classes. Like we had them way before every other school, like in our area. So there's definitely pluses, and I'm proud of my community, but I think that we need more conversations. Stop fighting each other over men. Because that's what I see the most. In my age group and community, it's men. Well, I don't really see it because I don't surround me. That's another thing. I don't surround myself with that. That's not, I see it as in like I hear about it. I might know someone who knows someone who knows someone. But that's not, you don't have, that doesn't have to be your reality. So I think that's good, what you have for brainwash. Like,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I'm gonna get to it.
I think that that's a huge thing it is brainwash. And I can see where it started from. I can see how the government has pushed these certain ideals into our brains and what it's turned into. But eventually we got to stop
Yeah.
blaming everybody else.
Yeah, and the people who are affected the most are the people who are pushed down in society more than anybody else. People need to understand that. If you have been that group of people, and yes, you're not the only group of people who have been oppressed and pushed down in society. Of course, there were the Native Americans, right? What a lot of people don't understand is that the Native Americans are really African Americans. Many of them don't know that either, but they are. And we had this conversation before. We talked about where all humankind started. One of the things that you mentioned, we talk about families, and you said there are people who want to get married, but I don't think that's not the majority of this generation that's coming up, and it's not the majority of people that I'm seeing. First of all, I think that before we even start talking about having families, first know thyself, know who you are, try your best to refrain and have discipline from actually making babies before it's time to have babies, and I can speak to that wholeheartedly because I didn't have the discipline at a younger age. No regrets about what happened. But when you start that way, you're already kind of starting behind the 8 ball. Then you have to figure
And
it
that's
out.
a fact.
Yes,
That's a fact.
and then you have to be connected to somebody that maybe wasn't the best person for you. But if you have strength, you'll learn how to communicate with that person. Sometimes it still doesn't work. And that's the thing that people need to understand. Sometimes, even as much as you would like to communicate for the sake of your children, sometimes it won't happen because there'll be disconnect because maybe that person wants you and it's not happening. Maybe you want that person, but that person has figured out, no, we have a child together. Move on. Because what does it say about you if you become obsessed with another individual and what they're doing and you feel like you can't live life without them? That's a psychosis.
Yeah, that whole thing, people need to have a little more self-control, is how I feel. I think
Absolutely.
that in 2026, there's options out there to make sure that we as women are protected from perpetuating that cycle. And I don't accept anymore the like, well, like I just at the point of it. If you want to do the BS, I think that like that's just something you should do singularly. I think
Yes.
you're right. We don't have a lot of people. That's what I was kind of saying about like the covenant thing. Like you're supposed to, that's a commitment to when you have kids in a family, like that's a commitment to your community. It's supposed to be. In the old days, that's what that meant. Like you're providing more people to be able to fund the earth, the system that we work in, your community. Like it's a whole thing that makes you feel whole as a human, and we're living out of sync with that. People just pop kids off and want to live off the next person, pop kids out and want to live off the next person, want to live off of the tax return, want to live off of the government. And that's not even a racial thing. That's over the board of people who
across the board
are doing that. And that's bullshit. You're hurting your
yes,
community.
across the
You
board.
are, yeah, like it's unfortunate to create so many single parent households and not have any repercussions for that too.
You made a good point when you said across the board. The majority of single mothers aren't black mothers, and I hope people understand that. The images are perpetuated. I remember working in a newspaper years ago in Grand Rapids, and the images that they wanted to put in a series, it was a news series called The Faces of Poverty. So why would they have the symbol created through pictures of a single black mother holding her child? When the faces of poverty, the majority of faces, even though we wouldn't know it based upon what we see and based upon what's in the media and based upon what we allow ourselves and our children to listen to, we don't represent the majority of the faces of poverty.
They don't represent the majority of most of the stuff we do.
Yes. And so what I'm seeing and what I've seen over the last 30 years is, you've heard the term self-fulfilling prophecy, that when you begin to take in these images and you begin to believe that's who you are, then this is what a younger generation as children will gravitate to. But what I'd like to see us do is to turn the page,
Yeah.
right? Turn the page and decide that, look, how many times do we see our young men and older men who own businesses? And I know a few men who own businesses. I know Bill Hill, who owns a business out in the mall. I know people who actually have tax companies. I know individuals who are into venture capitalists. My thing is, I know it's difficult to see those kind of individuals here, but I'm talking about us collectively, if we don't focus our attention on those children, and all children, but particularly our children from pre-K to 5th and 6th grade before they get to middle school, it's going to be rough out here.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. It's already rough.
And people deny that, like, environment is everything. Like, there's also nature, but I feel like humans are mostly based off of environment.
Yes.
Sometimes, because you can still grow out of those. There's, like, outliers for every situation. I will, like, say that, but I think the majority, I kind of forgot what I was saying. I do that a lot.
No, that's okay. You were on a roll, and then you wanted to jump on and move on to another topic. But, I'll bring us back full circle. And full circle is talking about pre-K to 5th and 6th grade.
Yes.
And
Yes.
not just because you hear this all the time. Well, it's what's happening in the home. It's what's going on in the home. And that's true. But when we know that exists, and I look at it like this, we can't expect parents who may not have had the kind of parenting that would have been conducive for them to become the very best that they could be. The thing is this: you shouldn't demonize the parents for not knowing what other parents may have known, because they didn't have to maybe work 2 jobs. Maybe they didn't have to rely on, leaving their children with individuals, whether it's a daycare, whether it's babysitters, and not having the resources to be able to be there, to be able to read to their children. I know parents who work 2 jobs, and then when they come home, it's like they got to make a meal. They have to do those kinds of things. I know those individuals. So,
but those are still, I feel like those are different cases, though. Honestly, I feel like people who work hard and don't have the time to sit, they still figure it out. I feel like those kids still have a schedule. Like there is a certain way to work about having to do things that other people don't have to. I do believe that. I think there's lots and lots of single mothers who are at work every day,
yes,
where their kids still had a safe and clean home, where their kids weren't watching their parents go through like abuse or just unhealthy situations. I do absolutely think.
Oh yeah. And then you have other categories,
but
right?
what's the majority here? That's kind of what I'm getting back to. What is the majority here? Because then that is our community. That's the hard part.
That's difficult to say, though, and we'll never know what the majority really is, and we'll never know what's going on in any of these homes where we think, for instance, if we have to measure what might be going on in the home based upon what we're seeing in a child, then we can sometimes be wrong. Sometimes we could be right. Well, wait a minute. Where's mom? Where's dad? What's going on between mom and dad? Are both parents in the home? Well, we already know that there are many cases where both parents are in the home. But we also know there are many cases where there are fathers who are spending time with their children, trying to do the best they can. They might be
Mm-hmm.
working two jobs, right? I don't like to see either parent demonized,
Mm-mm.
right? We see all sides of this thing, and across the board. We're not just talking about black fathers and black mothers, but I'd really like to see us start thinking about ways that we can work together to fill the gap for each other.
Yeah, that's why I feel like getting into schools is a big thing. Helping out with the community events and stuff like that. I think that that's, but how do you get that information?
Yeah,
Where
well,
is that posted?
I think that one of the things that, because I've heard this argument many times, I think that the individuals who want what's best for their children, they find a way.
They seek it
It
out.
goes
That's
back.
valid.
It goes back to what you said before. Individuals don't wait on anybody to give them information; they seek it. And now we
Mm,
got these computers at our
true.
fingertips.
True.
We've got these iPhones at our fingertips. The problem is that we don't use the iPhones to empower ourselves. We
Mm-mm.
use these iPhones as entertainment, as
Like a
entertainment.
television.
And when some of the individuals begin to look at the screen time that they spent on their phones and it didn't do anything to help or assist their children in becoming more powerful
True.
and becoming more resilient, then it's a problem.
Yeah.
And it also leads many people to being broke. I don't care what anybody tries to tell me. If you spend all of your time and then you become entertained by what other people have and you start believing that you need to have it, then you're in trouble.
Well, I can even tell you doing jobs where you sit and look at your phone. Like I had a big girl job with health insurance and everything, and I don't make nearly as much sitting and staring at a computer screen, not doing anything, not moving, not actually making a difference, not adding value to something. But, I'm a server and that's not that like, great of I would say an athlete. I'm proud of it, but you know, but I'm actually moving. I'm up, I'm talking. I'm not focused on a computer screen or an
Yeah.
unreal situation. Like it's definitely different when you or whether it's a job or just in general using computers for a job or
Mhm.
any of that stuff. It's just not healthy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of the things that I know is happening, and I'm not sure what the numbers would be. It would be nice to know. I'd be interested in knowing how many young people actually figured out ways by doing their own research to actually make money off of their phones,
Oh, I think
off
a
of the
lot.
internet. Yes, there are a lot of
That's
folks.
something my generation is
Yes,
fire in.
right.
That's we're not working. That's why these jobs are going out of business because people are figuring it out.
Yes.
How to do that, how to be an internet, an influencer.
And so I'm not mad at anybody who's able to do that right there.
I
And
don't
and it's
yeah.
not and it's not always about the influencers, right? There are so many jobs that are
Mm,
associated with what you can do online for companies that need you. And
absolutely.
so if we begin to see those kind of individuals, I'm with it.
But like high paying, not $15 an hour, like
Yeah,
genuinely high paying
yeah,
enough to be okay with.
right. I wanted to say this too because I like always touching up on education. As I said, we'll deal with a multitude of topics. We've already probably dealt with about 6 or 7 topics already, right? In less than 30 minutes. But I always have to give tips to parents who you say you want the best for your child. I've used this term many times, not just associated with education, but if you say you want anything, then the best way to determine if that's really true is by what you do. It's by what you do, not by what you say. So if you're saying that I want the best for my child, there are going to be certain things that you do. So let's start with elementary school, pre-K. And this is why I want this emphasis. I want you all to understand this. I've been an educator for almost 30 years. Higher education, though. I came from higher education. I wasn't a public school teacher. I was a college educator, and I'm still a college educator. And what I've learned from that experience, particularly since I started at that level, right? First, I started as a reporter, a media person, and then went into college education and then came back down into public school education, right? What I learned is that there there are these phases, first of all, that our children go through, and then there are also tracks that children are on. There's a general education track, which the majority of students are in. I say general, I don't like to use this
Typical.
term, right?
Typical.
Right, but I often equate it to Gen Pop, right? Gen Pop is a prison term, and let me tell you why. And I'm not saying this is the case throughout America. I'm not saying it's the case specifically in Sandusky. All I'm saying is this, that if you are doing your very best and you're earning A's and B's and you're actually learning something, let's say for the most part you have mostly A's, then if you're in elementary school and you have all A's, then what will stop you from saying, my child needs to be in honors classes? I encourage parents who have children who are excelling at that level to at least say, you know what, if my child is doing this well, I want my child to seek the highest ground possible.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you feel like your child is doing well in general population classes, general education classes, but for some reason you fear elevating them, why not try first to actually enroll your children in honors classes before they get to middle school? Because what I've witnessed is the honors classes, the AP classes, the college classes, for the most part, you won't have those individuals who haven't figured out what it is they want to do, which for the most part is many students, but there are many students who say, man, I'm dead serious about what I'm doing in school.
Mm-hmm.
If you want the best for your child, do whatever you can to make sure they're on that track. But if you want them on that track, you also have to dedicate some of your own time. You have to find ways to cultivate what's inside of them to give them the very best. Now, I don't know what you think about that, but that's one of the things that I've learned.
I agree. I just think we should, as a community, be able to get that information out more to even help. Because what if parents don't always have those thoughts? Like, what if, like, I don't know. I think we can talk about it, but it definitely has to be solution based with that type of thing. It's a serious conversation, and I think it's not as serious as it should be. But yes, you should be pushing your kids for the best. But how do we as a community do that if you're not?
So let me ask you this.
Mm.
Let's pretend you don't have any children, but let's
Mm-mm.
pretend you do. And based on the limited knowledge that you have just dealing with your brother, my grandson Kane, when you know that he's doing well, if you're the mother, and he's every class, biology, math, writing, A's, straight A's, then you move to the next level, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know that elementary is pretty much, at the foundational level,
Mm-hmm.
but you also always, even at that level, you'll have gifted,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so what happens when they begin to move on to middle school? What are you going to do as the parent? What are you going to suggest when you talk to the counselor? Because you talked about information. I know that counselors talk about this. Then it becomes this this thing where we need to be empowered to know what to ask. If your child is doing well, what would you do? Would you tell me what would you do?
I would have them in the classes.
Yeah, but if I hadn't said that, would you?
Yes.
Okay.
See, but that's the thing though. Like, that's a hard question to ask someone like me though, because that's no option but. I ride my sister's butt over this topic because I just feel like I would not, as a parent, accept anything less. That was the exception. I wasn't in honors classes per se, but I had wonderful grades. Like, for all, I can't even remember the last time I had anything under a C. So it is hard for me to imagine that conversation, because for my kid, you have no option but to be in honors. I talked to a Mr. Andre Grant recently, and that was a conversation he had with me, and it inspired me a lot. And not to tell his business, but his daughter has always been wonderful. She is a wonderful young lady, and I can tell by the way that he looks at things, the way that he acts, the way that he raised his children. I don't know. I admire that a lot. I don't admire, like, I won't just agree with it. It's like, oh, you never know what these kids are going to turn out like. I think that is a cop out. Yes, you have your outliers, but I think the gen pop, the majority, they are typical. There is things and things, like, there's so many things that you can do. I'm not saying it's perfect, but as far as that specific conversation with education, you got to figure out how to make it fun. The adults have to figure out how to make it fun, how to make it possible, how to make it accessible. Look at Matilda. I know it's a movie, but, like, I think that magic is out there for the people who are above us, that's like you upper generations. I think there's a gap of generation that definitely failed us in that area. That education wasn't the most important things, and test grades started to drop and all that different stuff. And maybe I don't even know that poverty got worse. I don't know.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I think that also what happened is that I don't think that parents stopped caring about the education of their children. I think that the times that we lived in terms of the times that we're living in, even now, economically, socially, they've changed drastically.
Absolutely.
In the 80s, everybody worked. Everybody had a job.
Yes,
everybody was able to make money, right? And even if they weren't doing the right things, right, they were actually making money illegally. It was a time where, we were booming. But over time, as those powers that be begin to take more and more, begin to say, we don't need that for those communities, then you have folks that have to hustle more. You have folks that have to work 2 jobs. You have folks who didn't have any options who feel like, especially back in the day, that they needed to sell drugs because the school wasn't providing what they needed, right? Particularly in inner city communities. So, what I'm seeing is that...
Or did they clone us? You need to watch that movie.
I need to watch that.
Because that's what this is about.
And you made me think of something. And I'm going to connect this, and then, we can talk a little bit more and then wrap it up. But when you talked about Coach Andre, and I know Coach Andre, and I coached his daughter, Andra. And let me say this about Andra, right? Not only did she have parents who cared about her success, but the thing that they I think impressed upon her was how to treat other people. And I know this is true, right? Because Andra at one time had more scholarships than any of the other students in the high school when she graduated. I believe it was because of her demeanor, her personality, and how she treated each and every one of her teachers, everybody that came into her space. It was about her kindness. And that's another thing that's lost upon people. It's like if you walk around and you're mad all the time, or you walk in a hallway, and I've said this before. I've said this about some teachers. Like most of our teachers will speak and say hello. But when you see a teacher that's looking grumpy or looking the other way when they come past you, I'm always wondering, what are you doing with our children? Why are you in our schools?
Yeah, because that's a job. You need to be smiles and rainbows.
And yes, and nobody's saying it needs to be phony, but you actually need to work on yourself to figure out.
Yeah, to feel that. Genuinely feel that.
Yes. And when you're in a position where things aren't going well, it could be related to health. It could be related to the job you're in. It could be related to anything. They'll affect you. My thing is always to fight against it and find those things that you're thankful for. And if you really think about those things that you're thankful for, then I believe your demeanor changes accordingly. You begin to treat people better. You begin to say, well, I'm just, because I say this all the time, I'm happy to be in the land of the living, knowing that I could have died at least 4 times that I know of, right? With a liver transplant, 2 liver transplants, getting hit by a drunk driver, being in a place where somebody was stabbed and, really I was the target, right? Being robbed at gunpoint with one man telling me, shoot him, right? I've been in those places. So the way you live, there are some people who would live more dangerously after that. I'm like, I never try to live dangerously. Now, I was a buffoon at one point in my life, but I use that as my armor now. I use that as ammunition to try to teach others, like, look, no need to do that, right? Try to treat other people like you want to be treated. What's that golden rule? So anyway, I didn't mean to take up all of the time and space, but go ahead and give us something for the people. Wrap it up, because you're listening to Consciousness Unchained. That is the format, Consciousness Unchained. Anytime somebody wants to come on and talk about any particular issue that actually needs the public's attention, it needs the community's attention, come on, look, we got the mic. We got the mic right here. And I like doing this because I took my wife to go see New Edition, Boys to Men, and Tony Braxton, right? Bobby Brown. And this is one of the things they were doing. They were pointing the mic into the audience, letting folks sing. Well, I got the mic pointing at anybody who wants to come on and talk to us about what we need to do in our community to make it better. Anything you want to say, Shy, to wrap this up for the evening?
I think we all have the power in us, and everybody should educate themselves. Education, knowledge is power. Seriously. I think that is, if you have nothing else, having your mind is everything. You can do anything with it.
Yes.
And I think we have definitely lost ourselves, our identities, our id, our ego. And
yes, being in a space where you have the right mind. And the right mind just means you're at peace, that you rarely let anything bother you, that you don't take anything personal, If you take everything personal, you're going to be miserable.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fact. If you take
Mm-hmm.
every single thing personal that you believe is related to you, then you are going to live a miserable life. If you're giving, and if you really care about other people and you get along with folks, right? Now some people will say that, well, he's not like that. Well, it depends on who you are. And it depends on what you're trying to do to me or my people. And my people, by the way, are all people who struggle, right? Particularly black folks. I am a black man in America, but I care about all people, particularly those who are being oppressed, being abused. I will stand up for them as well. So, with that, I'd like to say thank you for joining us. You've been listening to Consciousness Unchained. That's what you see in the back. Consciousness Unchained is the platform, is this particular episode. I needed to say this so people will understand. We did have a program that we would do from time to time called Consciousness Unchained, but the young man who actually came up with the name um, hasn't hosted yet. Giving him the opportunity to host, giving him the opportunity to actually take the video to start out, to warm up. We're still waiting on you. That mic's here for you. So I don't need to call you out. You know who you are, and you want to come on camera, come talk to us, right? Just come talk to us and then talk to the people. I'm waiting on you. With that said, we're signing off. Do your thing,
Bye.
Shy. Peace.